The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms.
The House is now in session. All persons not entitled to privileges on the floor, please retire to the gallery.
The members will rise and be led in prayer by Reverend Douglas B. Wright, Senior Pastor of the Keystone Baptist Church, Berryville, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, led by the gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the men and ladies that represent the people of Virginia. You know that many of them have sacrificed their time and effort with a genuine desire to make things better. I thank you as well for promising wisdom to those that ask for it. As this body begins its business today, I ask that you will grant them wisdom to make decisions that honor you. I pray specifically for those that are in leadership positions. Lord, we ask you to give them the ability to listen carefully and to think and communicate clearly. We ask that you will direct the affairs of today's legislative session. Thank you for your kindness to us as a nation and as a state. Help us to be discerning as we seek to honor you. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I've examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for February 9th, 2016. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39 are now in order. Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
Not at this time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Scott, Mr. Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, it's not very often that we receive good news from the Supreme Court, but yesterday the Supreme Court gave a major lifeline to Southwest Virginia and Virginia. The Supreme Court ruled to halt the implementation of President Obama's Clean Power Plan. It's not only good for my region of the state, but for all of Virginia. The Clean Power Plan was yet another example of the overreaching federal government and more proof of Obama's war on coal. These regulations would have had a devastating impact on Virginia's economy, killing jobs and significantly driving up energy costs for families and businesses. You know, when candidate Obama was running for president, he said that under his plan, electricity would skyrocket. And when the independent, nonpartisan State Corporation Commission confirmed this last year when they did an analysis of the EPA's proposed rule, and they estimated that Virginia families and businesses would see an increase in electricity costs between $5.5 billion and $6 billion. Higher energy costs disproportionately impact Virginia's poorest and most vulnerable citizens. Energy consumes 1/4 of the income for those families making less than $30,000. The Clean Power Plan would require a substantial portion of today's electricity production to be replaced in part with newer and higher cost production. And these costs are going to be reflected on your energy bill. The SEC State Corporation Commission stated that this plan would place at risk billions of dollars of recent investments in coal-fired facilities in Virginia and West Virginia that we as Virginia's ratepayers have begun to pay off. You know what that's like? That's like the federal government requiring us to buy a house, take out an expensive mortgage on it, and then tell us to tear it down. But you know what? We still got to pay the mortgage. So the State Corporation Commission estimated that the new rule would require us to prematurely shut down 2.8 megawatts of generation. Taking that much electricity off the grid would mean closing at least 2 power plants before they were scheduled to be retired. The coal mining industry in Virginia, which I'm proud to represent part of, supports directly and indirectly over 40,000 jobs in Virginia and contributes over $2 billion of economic impact. Closing coal-fired power plants will kill jobs not just at the plants and in the coal fields, but across Virginia. For example, coal amounts for 77% of the total weight of all exports down in Hampton Roads at the Norfolk Port. And in Northern Virginia, the data centers and the technologies that we're so proud that locate in Northern Virginia are the largest and fastest growing consumers of electricity. And those higher energy costs means higher prices for all of us as consumers. Last year, we called on our governor to halt the implementation of these regulations to give our families and our businesses the certainty that they need while these regulations were being challenged in court. Yet, we continued down that road of implementation on this unprecedented, unconstitutional overreach, further proving that the war on coal and our way of life was under attack. That's why my colleague, Delegate O'Quinn, this year introduced House Bill 2, which required General Assembly approval before we implemented this plan. It was important, we thought, that the citizens of Virginia have a voice in this energy policy of the Commonwealth through their elected representatives. House Bill 2 restored the legislative prerogative from unelected bureaucrats to those of us in this room who are the policymakers and policy decision makers. And that's why I was so proud to see that House Bill 2 was overwhelmingly passed here in the House. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Supreme Court for their decision yesterday to halt the implementation of the Clean Power Plan. The decision is certainly going to grant relief and certainty to all my constituents and all our constituents who worry about their future and the future of the Commonwealth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Danville, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we have 3 distinguished guests with us today, and I'd like to ask them to rise. We have former Delegate Joe May, we have former Delegate Algie Howell, and former Delegate Don Merricks. Let's give them a warm welcome.
We're delighted to see our former friends and colleagues with us today. Hope you enjoy your time in the Capitol. Take the tour if you get a minute. Great to see each of you. The gentleman from Giles, Mr. Yost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, joining us today are over 40 Rafford University students, administrators, Board of Visitor members, and President Penelope Kyle, who have been in the General Assembly building participating in the university's annual Advocacy Day during our 2016 session. As a proud alumni of Rafford, I'm excited by the continued recognition of RU's academic programs, the success of its sustainability efforts, and its dedication to excellence. Just this year, in 2016, RU has been named as one of the best colleges and universities in the Southeast by Princeton Review, the best regional universities in the South by U.S. News & World Report, and one of the best colleges for veterans in the South also by U.S. News & World Report. Mr. Speaker, members of the body, at this time I'd like to ask those in the gallery to stand, and I hope it'll be the pleasure of the body to give them a warm House welcome.
We're pleased to have the visitors from Radford with us today, and wish you the best on your further education. It's a wonderful school, and take full opportunity of it. Thank you for being here. The gentlewoman from Sussex, Ms. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction and a point of personal privilege.
The gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, visiting the Capitol, and they may be somewhere in one of the classrooms, are Project Discovery students from Sussex County along with their instructors. Project Discovery is a post-secondary access program currently offered through 24 partner agencies through the Virginia in grade 4 to 12. Project Discovery encourages students to stay in school and graduate and continue their education. At this time, I'd like the House to give them a warm welcome to the General Assembly. The governor recently submitted his 6-month report to the Money Committee chairman regarding the results from a highly successful agriculture and forestry industry development fund, better known as AFID. For the
House will be in order. Pardon me. The House will be in order. Gentlewoman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the first half of fiscal year 2016, a total of $600,000 was committed in agriculture and forestry industry development facility grants to assist 5 new and expanding projects in the state, representing $94.5 million in a new capital investments, 101 new jobs, and $28 million in new Virginia-grown purchases. I would like to recognize the following locality and businesses that received grants in the first half of the fiscal year or as of December the 31st. The City of Newport News, $12,000 grant for Ironclad Distillery. Goochland County, $250,000 for Hardaway Park Craft Brewery. Rockingham County, $250,000 grant for Virginia Poultry Growers Cooperative. Culpeper, $75,000 grant for Bright Farms. Loudoun County, $19,500 for the Pilot Malt House, Virginia. As the governor made clear in his State of the Commonwealth address, the agriculture and forestry industry development is a true example of bipartisan work to create new avenues for businesses, expansion, and promotions in our Commonwealth. As we all know, the program plays a critical role in securing capital investment and economic growth in agriculture and forestry, and has become a critical new tool in expanding values, added opportunities, and this bedrock of our economy across rural, urban, and suburban communities. As of December, awarded 28 grants worth over $2 million in the program's total history. These 28 grants represent 1,502 new jobs across 22 localities in Virginia. These grants are not only an immediate investment, but they lead to long-term investment. In fact, grant recipients on an average agreed to purchase 76% of their additional agriculture and forestry products from the Commonwealth. That's a huge ripple effect throughout the economy and help local farmers thrive. I would like to thank the governor and his team for their successful efforts on this program, the participating localities and entrepreneurs, the champion of this program in the General Assembly. This is a kind of bipartisan cooperation we need to build the new Virginia economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Portsmouth, Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. It's with a great degree of excitement and humbleness I rise this morning to give my insights on Black History Month. This is a personal endeavor of mine, and it hits right home at the core of my parents and the way I was raised. But I first wanted to talk about a little bit of the history and take a different spin on it. And for those of you who know me, especially my seatmate, I will be brief because I like being brief. Black History Month was started as a week. And much like our bill we passed earlier, it was started in 1926 and it was expanded to a month. But I think it oftentimes gets misrepresented because this month is more, in my mind, when I think about my parents, it's more about celebrating people who have overcome barriers and obstacles and ended in success. As a first-generation college goer, neither one of my parents attended college, but you've been the youngest of six, all of us did. Part of that, for you all who know me, my parents grew up in Bertie County, North Carolina, and every summer right after Vacation Bible School, we went to my grandfather's farm in Bertie County and offered free labor for the rest of the summer. It convinced us all that we wanted to go to college. So they were much smarter than we were. But I think that, they taught us the skill set. My grandfather, I remember sitting around talking about things. And I think this month, I wanted to personalize it because this month really should be more about our history. It's very, very important. It reminds us to talk about not only people who look like me or people who are of color, but it allows us a segment to, as President Gerald Ford said, the country needed to seize the opportunity, and I quote, to honor the often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every endeavor of our history. Now, those of you who have heard me before, I've talked about a wide range of accomplishments. I've talked about the African American jockeys who dominated the sport. Even talked about the sad story of the African American who invented the potato chip but didn't patent it. So we could be calling it something else, but he didn't get a patent. So, those are things that I like to have fun with, but I wanted you all to know that this is an opportunity for us to talk about stewardship, talk about opportunities that were seized, and talk about an awareness of not just African Americans, but every Americans, because we all are Americans. And what we do has a sense of accomplishment, and I'm proud to be a member of this body, and I just wanted to sort of put it in a reference point that other people will stand up this month and talk about individuals, but I wanted to know that this is a moment to shine on everyone's accomplishments, everyone's achievements, and doing the right thing, because that's what I think the overarching goal of not only this month, but the work that we do here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. Lupasi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, in the gallery this morning are 25 students from St. Christopher's School. So on behalf of Delegate Peace and Delegate Massey, I want to tell you a little bit about St. Christopher's School. It was founded in 1911. The school is based upon three criteria: the honor system, the literary societies, and the missionary society, with a focus on liberal arts education. St. Christopher's School continues to be a center for development of character and integrity for boys. Please join me, and I ask them to stand. Please join me in welcoming the students from St. Christopher's School today.
Pleased to have the students from St. Christopher with us today and welcome you to our capital. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, we have a group of students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a group of students from Manchester High School. There are about 50 of them. They're led by their teachers, Mrs. Margot Underwood and Mr. Mike Eakers. Mrs. Underwood, over 2 days, brings all of her students down. They observed committees. They did ACNR today in education and the legislative process. So I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to give the Manchester students a warm round of applause.
We're pleased as well to have the students from Manchester. Thank you for coming to the Capitol today. The gentleman from Rockingham, Mr. Will.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purposes of a request.
Gentleman may state it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the journal reflect that my seatmate, the gentleman from Virginia Beach, Delegate Stolley, is away on pressing personal business.
Journal will so reflect. The gentleman for James City County, Ms. Pogge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a request.
Gentleman may state it.
Mr. Speaker, on page 15 of the calendar, can HB 1390 be moved to the regular calendar?
What about it? Without objection, House Bill 1390, the regular calendar. The gentleman from Rockbridge, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for a request.
Gentleman may state it.
Mr. Speaker, on page 14 of the calendar, can House Bill 1089 go by for the day?
Without objection, House Bill 1089 by for the day. The gentlewoman from Newport News, Ms. Price. The gentleman from Loudon, Mr. LaRock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like Pastor Doug Wright to stand if he's still here with us. I want to introduce Pastor Doug Wright, who's traveled here from beautiful Berryville and led us in prayer this morning. Pastor Doug Wright moved to Winchester and Berryville area in November of 1994 to become senior pastor of Keystone Baptist Church. Pastor Wright has a passion for education. He serves as president of the Old Dominion Association of Church Schools, and I'm pleased to say he has joined many other leaders in the Commonwealth endorsing school choice initiatives in Virginia. Pastor and Mrs. Wright, isn't it great that Pastor Wright could meet Mrs. Wright, and have 3 children. The entire family has been very involved in the ministry. They have hosted Korean exchange students on a long-term basis. Pastor Wright's stated goal as a pastor is to see people trust Jesus Christ as Savior and to grow in Christ's likeness. I'm grateful for his service to our community in Clark County and the Commonwealth, and ask that we give Pastor Doug Wright a warm house welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Albo.
Speaker, an announcement, please.
Gentleman has the floor.
Speaker, members of the House, I made the same announcement a couple of days ago, and I've had about 4 or 5 people ask me where their bills are. So let me explain it again. In Virginia, we don't borrow money from Chinese to pay for bills we can't afford, right? So that means that we have to make some tough choices. In the world of the criminal law, there are lots of great bills that have fiscal impacts, but we can't afford them all. So what we did is we got the Appropriations Committee to tell us how much money they have, and they gave us an amount. And then the Republicans on our side picked some bills, and the Democrats on the side, led by gentlelady from Fairfax, Delegate Watts, picked some bills. If your bill is, you're wondering where it is, it's in what I call the ice box, which is just a holding place, and nothing's happening to it because it's not going to be heard. And just so you know that we're being fair here, there are 23 bills in the ice box, and 9 are Democrat bills and 14 are Republican bills, okay? So it's an equal opportunity ice box, okay? So if you have constituents or people who are asking you about the bill, what you need to tell them is we couldn't find the money for it. Thank you.
The gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
On behalf of the General Assembly Military and Veterans Caucus, I would like to extend an invitation to all members of the House at this year's 4th Annual Military Appreciation Night. It will be at the Capitol Ale House, which is on Main Street, commences at 7 p.m., runs through 9 p.m., and it meets the requirement as a widely attended event. Hope to see you there, and if you're sick, there'll be plenty of medicine.
Thank you. The gentleman from Hampton, Ms. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for introduction.
Gentlewoman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, joining us at the Capitol are representatives of 200-plus men of Hampton Roads. I'm not sure if they've made it into the gallery, but they are someplace on this campus. The 200-plus men of Hampton Roads has joined us for their annual trip to the capital of Virginia to examine the legislative process of the General Assembly. This is the 16th year that members of the Hampton Roads Committee of 200-plus Men Incorporated have brought young men and their chaperones from various high schools in Hampton Roads. I hope it's the pleasure of this body to give them a warm health welcome wherever they are.
Wherever they might be. The gentleman from Campbell, Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an announcement.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow as we come over from the General Assembly building to the Capitol here, you'll probably experience a smell that's normally in barbecue season. However, the Virginia Cattlemen's Association, along with the Virginia Dairymen's Association, is having their annual steak fry tomorrow. I'd like to invite everybody to come to that. I personally paid for 140 meals, and I will not give anyone any more gifts. So if you're concerned about it being a gift and you can't accept it, I will not give you anything else. I hope that y'all will stop by and enjoy the steaks.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, we have in the gallery today a group of students from the Hillwood Alternative School in Fairfax. I had the pleasure of visiting them on Take Your Legislator to School Day. I'm pleased that they're here with their principals and teachers, Carrie Williams, Dave Penland, Ken Piper, Corrine Farley. And I hope that we will give them a warm house welcome for these students at Hillwood who we soon will be seeing at a college somewhere near you. Thank you.
Delighted to have the students with us today. Hope you enjoy your time in the Capitol. The gentleman from Culpeper, Mr. Freitas.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion and an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
I move that we move House Bill 759. This is my bill. I'd like to refer it back to counties, cities, and towns, please.
What page would that be?
Sorry, that's page 7, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Culpeper, Mr. Freitas, moves that House Bill 759 be re-referred to the city on county, cities, and towns. May in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion is agreed to.
And introduction, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor.
Today, somewhere on the grounds, we have the school boards from both Culpeper County and Orange County. I hope it'll be the pleasure of the House to give them a warm House welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delighted to have the students from Culpeper County with us today. The gentleman from Henrico, Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a request, please.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, and I've discussed this with the patron, Delegate Yancey, may House Bill 1252 on page 20 go by for the day.
Without objection, House Bill 1252 by for the day.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Washington, Mr. O'Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. There are a number of special guests with us all throughout the Capitol and in the House gallery as well, representing the Virginia Sheriff's Association, and I would ask that they please stand. Among them is actually Sheriff Richard Vaughn of Grayson County, where I'm privileged to represent, and he is this year's president of the Virginia Sheriff's Association. You may know that there are 123 elected sheriffs and over 8,800 deputy sheriffs throughout the Commonwealth. Sheriffs are responsible for running local jails and several regional jails, and they're the primary law enforcement agency in 86 counties in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They're also responsible for the service of process and serve more than 3,000 civil process papers annually. They provide security for our judges and courthouses, and they keep citizens safe during the judicial process. So, Mr. Speaker, each and every member of the House has a sheriff, and so I hope that you will join me in giving them a very warm House welcome and thanking them for all that they do.
We're honored to have the sheriffs with us today, and we thank you so much for all that you do for your local communities and for the Commonwealth. Thank you for being here today. Are there further motions or resolutions under Rule 39? Gentlewoman from Bedford, Ms. Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could House Bill 1390, that was moved to the regular calendar, so I don't know what page it's on anymore, could that go by for the day? It's my bill.
Page 15. Page 15.
Yeah. Without objection, House Bill 1390 to the regular calendar and by for the day. The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to share some good news with the members of the body. We had some of our former colleagues here in the back, and I want to share some news of my predecessor. Many of you knew Jim and Nancy Scott very well. I was proud to just share the information that on February 4th, Jim and Nancy became grandparents for the first time. Their oldest daughter, Casey, gave birth to a 6-pound, 4-ounce baby girl named Meredith Virginia Laxton.
Gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Langenfelder.
Mr. Speaker, rise for a brief announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the Sportsman's Caucus is going to be meeting in 5 West. We have a change of venue tomorrow. And we will have with us the Congressional Sportsman's Caucus that will be coming down and sharing with our members many of the initiatives that are taking place across the country. And so if you have an interest in that, this is a great organization. They've really got their pulse, or they've really got the pulse of where we're going with hunting and fishing in the nation, and may give you an opportunity to think about some new ideas for next session. Thank you.
Are there further motions, resolutions under Rule 39? If not, the clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for today, Wednesday, February 10th, 2016. Page 1 of the printed calendar, House bills on third reading uncontested. Third reading uncontested. The block has 13 bills, and they are as follows. House Bill 111, page 2 of the printed calendar. House Bill 301, 304, 684, 832, 945, 1030. Page 4, House Bill 1146, 1182, 1209, 1223, 1300, and House Bill 1322.
Shall the bills pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, no 0.
Ayes 99, no 0. The bills are passed.
Continuing with today's calendar, House bills on third reading regular calendar. House bills, third reading regular. First up, House Bill 815, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the method of execution.
Shall the bill pass?
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to emphasize again today that this is not an expansion of the death penalty in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it is a very important issue, and I would like to say that this body is responsible for the safety of our fellow Virginians, and we're responsible for carrying out the justice that is decided by the other branch of government, the judicial branch, what they deem is proper and correct. It's our job to help carry out what they have decided in a court of law. Now, I carried this bill 2 years ago, and I only spoke to the facts. At the time, we had no upcoming executions, and we still had a dose or two of the necessary chemicals used for lethal injection. But times have changed now. This is 2 years later, and as I speak right now, our Department of Corrections does not have the necessary chemicals to use, or pharmaceuticals to use for lethal injection. And we do have a scheduled execution that's coming up very soon. And to remind you all of why this is such an important bill and why we have to do our job to carry out the justice system, I'm going to explain to you the situation that happened, what this condemned inmate here in the Commonwealth of Virginia did, and how he did it. Now, Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, in late 2005, this condemned inmate was involved in at least 9 killings between Pennsylvania and Virginia. Out of those 9 killings, 2 of them were 2 entire families. 3 individual killings in one incident, 4 in another. There was also several malicious woundings and other home invasions involved in this crime spree. But let me give you an idea of why we have the death penalty on the books here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In January 2006, right here in Richmond, these 2 hardworking Virginians, Purcell Tucker and Mary Tucker, both, again, hardworking. Purcell was a forklift operator. Mary, she was a cleaner, minding their own business in their private home in Southside, Virginia. When this condemned prisoner, who has his execution date coming soon, decided he was going to go into their house, rob them, and murder them. Now, how did Purcell and Mary die? They were beaten violently across the face, and then they had plastic bags pulled over their head and duct taped around their neck. They suffocated because their hands were tied behind their backs. They painfully, slowly suffocated. Now, if any of you have ever heard of what suffocation is like and how it is as a death, it is horribly painful. At first, there's great panic, and then there's an extreme burning in the lungs. Then you start to lose your proper sense of thinking and eventually fall unconscious, and then you expire. Now, when this Tucker family, their daughter, Ashley Baskerville, she was in the home as well. She experienced the same fate. She was the adult daughter of the Tucker family. Now, when this happened in 2006, the police responded to this incident and quickly developed some leads. The leads led them to Pennsylvania, where this condemned inmate of the Commonwealth of Virginia was found, in Philadelphia. And when he was found, he was questioned by the Philadelphia and Virginia detectives that responded up there about the Tucker family. This condemned inmate, who is now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, spoke to the Virginia detectives and asked them, is the death penalty used in Virginia? And our detectives answered him honestly. They said, yes, it is. And he says, then I'm not talking to you. Go away. It's over. Now, when the Philadelphia detectives started talking to him, he asked them, Does Philadelphia have the death penalty? What was the answer? No, not right now. It's not allowed in Pennsylvania right now. So he said, well, I'll talk to you. And obviously, he's not a legal scholar because he told him the story and more. And what they found from the investigation of the deaths of Purcell Tucker, Mary Tucker, and Ashley Baskerville is that he was also involved in a gruesome homicide that happened about a week earlier on New Year's Day, 2006. And let me tell you what happened in this incident. In this incident, in the Carytown section of the Commonwealth of Virginia, this condemned inmate decided he was going to break into another home to rob and plunder and murder. And while in my view, the Tucker family is enough, that outrageous incident is enough, what I'm about to tell you now is even more disturbing because it no longer involves adults. It involves innocent little girls. So what this condemned inmate did is he broke into the Harvey household in the Carytown section of Virginia, where Mr. Harvey and his wife, Catherine, and their 4-year-old daughter, Ruby, were enjoying a New Year's Day, getting ready for a party later in the day for friends and associates. So this condemned inmate breaks into their home, grabs Catherine Harvey in the kitchen. She screams. The husband tries to stand. He's in the living room, starts getting up and out of his chair and is told, sit back down and your family won't be hurt. So he sits back down, and they're all three ushered down into the basement of this house. Now, what happens in the basement? They start tying up Mr. Harvey. They tie him up in front of his wife and daughter. And in the meantime, someone comes to the front door of the house. So they go to the front door. This condemned inmate has Miss Harvey go to the front door where their 9-year-old daughter, Stella, is being dropped off from a sleepover at a friend's house. Now, as far as the detectives could ascertain, the condemned told her that just be quiet, shut up, and you'll be fine. We're just here to steal stuff. So this mother of 9-year-old Stella and 4-year-old Ruby believes him and brings her 9-year-old daughter in for her certain death. So now they bring the entire family down into the basement where they proceed to tie up and duct tape Mr. Harvey and throw him on the floor. Then they proceed to duct tape and tie up Mrs. Harvey and put her on the couch. Obviously, a 4-year-old and 9-year-old girl at this point are hysterically crying, not knowing what to do, panicking, seeing their dad. And as most of you know, as most of you in here have had children, and you know at that age, little girls and little boys still think their daddy is the strongest man on earth. They just do. And think of their confusion when their daddy's being forced on the floor, tied up, gagged, and being bullied around in their own house. Their mom, same thing, being told to shut up over and over. So the girls are crying, the girls are upset. So they decide, this condemned inmate, he decides that now we got to tie these girls up. Well, the girls cry and scream and beg, I don't want to be taped. I don't want to be taped. Please don't tape me. The condemned doesn't like the protests. So he sticks socks in their mouth and duct tapes their mouth shut with a sock in their mouth. Then this condemned inmate decides that he's going to tie them all up. So little 4-year-old Ruby is duct taped to Catherine Harvey's lap, and 9-year-old Stella is duct taped and sat on the couch next to Mrs. Harvey. Now, this condemned inmate obviously As I said before, not the brightest bulb. Got what he could from the house and is deciding, my gosh, they might recognize me. I got to do something. So he decides he's going to kill this family. So he slashes. Now, in all honesty, the detectives don't know the order of how this happened, but it doesn't really matter. He slashes little Ruby's throat, who's duct taped to her mom. There is no duct tape over their eyes. So the night before last, when I was really thinking about this and what I was thinking about was what I was going to talk about, I want to ask you all to think about this too. And the horrible part of this is I had time to think about this. If you're a parent of a 4-year-old child and a violent intruder's come to your house and has duct taped your child to you on your lap and starts to slash her throat in front of you, what do you do? What can you do? It's the most horrific thing you could ever imagine in your life. Do you look at that 4-year-old right in the eyes, trying to tell her with your eyes you love her and that it'll be okay? Even as you hear her shrieking through the sock in her mouth with the duct tape? Do you do that? Do you try to hum a nursery rhyme through the sock in your mouth to try to calm her down? Or does the horror just make you close your eyes and look away? Catherine Harvey didn't have the luxury to think all night like I did what I would have done in that situation with my child. As you're watching your child's throat get slashed, as you're feeling the violent jerks and trying to pull away from the mother, because that's what will happen. It's a natural reflex. This little 4-year-old girl duct taped to her mom, violently trying to jerk away, and the mother feels every jerk. She feels every violent reflex going through this little 4-year-old, innocent little Ruby's body. And yet it doesn't kill Ruby. It doesn't kill her. So my guess at this point is mom is screaming as loud as she can through her duct-taped mouth with a sock stuffed in her mouth. And then he decides to start slashing her throat in front of little Ruby. And Stella, who's sitting right next to mom and Ruby. Now, what's going through Stella's mom at this point? Dad's on the floor, bound, gagged, tied up, laying on his stomach. Remember, he's the strongest man in the world to these two little girls. What is going through their minds? Now, Stella is looking at her mom's throat being slashed. Is the blood spraying all over Stella? Is the blood spraying all over Ruby? Perhaps into Ruby's eyes? Because keep in mind, Ruby's still alive. Stella's still alive. They even stab Catherine in the chest through the lung. Still alive. Then they move on to Stella. Slash her throat. Mom and Ruby, they're still alive. They are still alive watching this. But this Nimrod, this evil, I'm not going to call him a human being, this evil condemned inmate that is now an inmate in the Commonwealth of Virginia, can't get it right. He doesn't hit their jugulars. He doesn't hit the carotid. I mean, they're still alive. Works on dad too. Starts cutting hen throat. They're all still alive. They're all moaning. They're all screaming through their duct-taped mouths. So he decides my attempt at cutting them didn't work. So let me get the ball peen hammer. Let me start beating them across the head. Perhaps that'll do it. So he decides to beat all 4 of them across the head. And then to try to cover his crime, he decides, let me light a fire. Let me put a fire down here. Let me pour alcohol and light a fire. Apparently they pour it all over Mr. Harvey. They could tell through the autopsy and the crime scene. And they light the fire while all 4 of them are still in the basement. They're not only have they desecrated and brutally murdered 4 innocent people, now they're going to absolutely desecrate their bodies. You know what the sad part is Stella's still alive. And how do I know that? because she died of smoke inhalation and soot inhalation. Right. Him slashing her throat and beating her over the head with a hammer, he couldn't succeed at that. Poor little Stella died of smoke inhalation. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you before, this isn't expanding the death penalty. But the case I just told you about is exactly why we have this punishment on our books. This condemned inmate went through our court system with our judges and was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt through DNA, through confession, through corroboration. He was found guilty without a reasonable doubt. It is our job as this legislature to do what we can in working with our judicial system, an equal branch of our government, to finish this task of justice. So, Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Tucker family, on behalf of the Harvey family and two little girls, Ruby, 4 years old, and Stella, 9, I would ask that you vote for this bill and make sure that the Tucker and the Harvey families are able to get the justice that they deserve and that our justice system has determined they deserve. I'd ask you to please vote for this bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 62, noes 33.
Ayes 62, noes 33. The bill is passed.
House Bill 9, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to voter registration form of the application and required information.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 64, noes 31.
Ayes 64, noes 31. The bill is passed.
House Bill 268, a bill to amend and reenact sections of the code relating to the Land Bank Entities Act.
Shall the bill pass?
Speaker.
I'm sorry. Gentleman Suffolk, Mr. Morris.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I definitely understand my friend from Danville, his desire to assist these blighted properties in Danville. But this bill does much more than provide a means for a locality to deal with blighted properties. In fact, this is a vast expansion of government power, creating a land bank entity. And just for a few examples of this expansion of power, the localities can now creating full corporations, a real estate investment corporation who can sue and be sued, borrow money from private lenders, localities, contracts, enter into contracts for the performance of not only the land bank, but also on behalf of the localities, to invest funds, to design, develop, construct, demolish, reconstruct, rehabilitate, renovate, relocate, improve the property and rights and interests in property, creates and grants easements, enter into, and this is the biggest part, enter into partnerships, joint ventures, and other collaborative relationships and other public and private entities for the ownership, management, development, and disposition of real property. And this is not limited to simply residential. It's any property. Any property. You know, is it the proper role of government to create a real estate investment corporation? I just do not believe it is. That those of us who do believe in a limited government, this isn't it. This is not it. And Mr. Speaker, I just cannot support this bill. Thank you.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 80, excuse me, noes 19.
Ayes 80, noes 19. The bill is passed.
Turning to page 7 of the printed calendar, House Bill 647, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to tree conservation ordinance notice.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 83, no 16.
Ayes 83, no 16. The bill is passed.
House Bill 759 has been re-referred to county, cities, and towns. House Bill 879, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to alcoholic beverage control, farm wineries, and limited brewery licenses, land zoned agricultural.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 86, noes 10.
Ayes 86, noes 10. The bill is passed.
Turning to page 8 of the printed calendar, House Bill 919, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to delinquent water and sewer charges.
Gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Morris.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I thank my friend from Williamsburg who brought me some additional material on this bill, but I still cannot support this bill. I cannot support granting the authorities, the locality, the authority to shut off water after 30 days. It lowers it from 60 days to 30 days. And working folks, sometimes it takes more than 30 days to get your finances back together. And those who support the bill will argue, well, we're just bringing it in line with other utilities. Well, this is not internet, it's not cable, it's not phone, it's water, a basic necessity of life. And I am actually shocked that those who claim to support the poor would support this bill. I'm shocked. And if you support the poor in more than just mere words and in actions, I urge you to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from Fauquier, Mr. Weber.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to point everybody to the language of the actual bill that came out of committee. It takes a shall from shutting off water at 60 days to a may. And it gives the localities room to work with folks in order to pay their bill. So in this case, it gives them, there are localities currently that do cease services less than 60 days. And the idea is that some of those folks, unless acted upon, do not start paying their bills. And imagine as you start getting your bills and then your fines and then your fees over the next 60 days and even further, they get racked up. After 30 days, they may force the issue, talk to the constituent, and work with them to get a payment plan. That was the idea behind the bill, at least as I heard it in committee. Thank you.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 78, noes 21.
Ayes 78, noes 21. The bill is passed.
House Bill 944, a bill to address local ordinances concerning the installation or use of landscape cover materials until regulations have been approved as part of the statewide fire prevention code.
Mr. Speaker.
The
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Pocosa, Mr.
I'd like to speak to the bill, sir.
I'm sorry?
Speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in opposition to my fine colleagues from Harrisonburg's bill, and I'd like to ask that you please oppose it as well. I was a lone dissenting voice on this bill in committee, and I want to explain why. As a former fire chief of the city of Pocosa, I have an abiding appreciation for the travails that individual fire departments go through. As a former mayor of that city, I have an abiding appreciation for the work of local government that is closest to the people. I do know that what may be problematic in Harrisonburg may not be problematic in the city of Pocosa, for example. When a fire department tells me that they have a mulch fire problem and that they've responded to over 200 mulch fires that have resulted in several $1 million of damage, and that the local city council enacted an ordinance in the name of public safety to provide for a different type of ground cover, one other than mulch, one that is aesthetically pleasing in order to lessen the incidence of mulch fires, and one that I'm told is working well. And a bill has been introduced in the General Assembly and then amended to say that only in Harrisonburg would a city council be barred from enacting this sort of an ordinance. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, I know of no other single piece of legislation that prohibits a locality from enforcing a local ordinance. And it's with good reason that the General Assembly is responsible for issues that impact the whole Commonwealth. It leaves local officials to address their local issues. The passage of this bill, I believe, would set a very dangerous precedent for the General Assembly and the Commonwealth as well. And I would urge my colleagues to vote no.
Shall the bill pass?
Mr. Speaker?
Gentleman from Harrisburg, Mr. Wilt.
Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, and certainly honor the comments made by the gentleman for Poquoson. I too share his sentiments about the fine work that our safety, especially our fire officials, do for all of our localities. And it's certainly everyone's wish that safety and properties be protected in all of our localities. I hope that you support this measure, because my hope is that as it goes through the proper process, that a concern that the ordinance arose out of would be taken and be examined by the interested parties that were all involved in what originated in the ordinance. And so it's my hope that those folks can come together and do it the right way, and not the city enact something, without getting the input, viable input from the parties that were interested in this. And so, again, I encourage the body to support the bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman Prince William. I'm sorry.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Could you tell me what I should do when my two favorite delegates disagree on a bill?
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 44.
Ayes 50, noes 44. The bill fails to pass. It takes 67 votes.
Continuing with the calendar. House Bill 1163, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to out-of-state concealed handgun permits, photo identification.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 72, noes 26.
Ayes 72, noes 26. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1188, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to technical adjustments of certain Senate district boundaries.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 66, noes 33.
Ayes 66, noes 33. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1237, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority powers.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 84, noes 15.
Ayes 84, noes 15. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1371, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to prohibition on certain local government mandates upon employers.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
Mr. Speaker, speaking briefly to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we talked a lot about this bill yesterday, but I went and looked at it again, and I want to assure the body that this is not a living wage bill. The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Davis, if you would like to prohibit localities from permitting living wages, you vote for his bill, but that's not this bill. This bill has to do with prohibitions against localities imposing a minimum wage on all employers in that locality. For example, if Manassas wanted to impose a requirement that all employers there, including McDonald's, pay $10 an hour. You couldn't do it if you passed this bill. So if you like this bill, maybe you like that. But before you vote for it, be aware that this is already the law of the Commonwealth. It's called the Dillon Rule. And that rule has been in effect for years and years and years. And it's so powerful that when we discussed a new constitution in 1970, we rejected any watering down of the Dillon Rule. So this is already the law in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's never been successfully challenged in any court case. So again, you have to wonder why we're cluttering up the code with this kind of language. Beyond that, and again, all you lawyers in the room, you might look at the construction of this bill and ask yourself if it creates some potential mischief. So you look at this bill and it says, a locality shall not enact any policy that requires an employer within the locality. Any policy. That would mean if the city of Manassas decided that they wanted to pay the city park workers $10 an hour, which exceeds the requirements of federal policy, which is the minimum wage, the requirements of federal policy, such policy would be unenforceable. Now, think about that for a minute. If you're a smart lawyer and this bill goes into effect and your locality puts forward some provision in their budget that you don't like, and it goes past the federal regs and pays employees of a city or a locality more than the minimum wage, can you then sue and argue that because of this statute, that policy is unenforceable? So vote how you will on the bill, but make sure you understand the full consequences of what you're doing.
Gentleman from Manassas, Mr. Miller.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the minority leader understands the bill now. I was a little confused yesterday. He asked me if I knew of any localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia that were doing this, and I did answer no. And then he started asking me about the other bill that I believe Delegate Davis is carrying in Virginia Beach. Mr. Speaker, this is a straightforward bill. I really can't see how a lawyer can construe this, any of those examples that the minority leader had brought forward. What I'd also say, Mr. Speaker, is I agree, this is against the Dillon Rule. But as the minority leader brought up yesterday, we have at least 2 localities that have required, other than the national or state standard, in contracts with that government. And quite frankly, I would be not surprised at all to see those same localities try to pass an ordinance that would require every private employer to pay a higher wage other than is required by state or federal law. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, who would stop that? I don't know. Perhaps the employers would have to sue that reside in that city or county. But with who we have in the Attorney General's office right now, I don't think he would actually defend that rule. I think he'd probably defend the locality against the Dillon Rule. Now, obviously, that's just an assumption, but I think it's a well-founded assumption, and I hope the members will pass the bill.
Gentleman from Alexandria, Mr. Levine.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I would say, Mr. Speaker, that I live in Alexandria, and Alexandria has no higher minimum wage than the rest of the state. The city of Alexandria may indeed pay some of its workers $8 an hour because it decided in a contract with its workers it's going to pay them $8 an hour. If the gentleman wants to prevent cities from paying workers any more than the minimum wage, maybe this bill would do that. But I guarantee you there is no minimum wage in Alexandria higher than the federal minimum wage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 65, noes 34.
Ayes 65, noes 34. The bill is passed.
Continuing with House bills on third reading regular calendar, page 10 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1386, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to firearm shows, voluntary background checks, penalties.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 3.
Ayes 96, noes 3. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1387, a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to large pre-election contributions. Deadline for disclosure.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 1.
Ayes 98, noes 1. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1391, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to protective orders, possession of firearms.
The gentleman from Shenandoah, Mr. Gilbert.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, for those of us who are, those especially on my side, who may be concerned about this deal in its entirety, I just wanted to note that the National Rifle Association supports this bill, as does the Virginia Citizens Defense League, who got up in committee and testified in favor of it. That is normally not a position that they would take, but in contributing to the universal deal, such as it is going through, I just want to tell, especially members on my side, that both the NRA and VCDL were in support of this bill as well.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 3.
Ayes 96, noes 3. The bill is passed.
House Bill 1232, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to compensation of dealers for recalled vehicles.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 1.
Ayes 98, noes 1. The bill is passed.
House Bill 784, a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to possession of firearms by persons adjudicated delinquent, military service exception.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The bill is passed.
House Bill 587, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to memorials and monuments.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 82, noes 16.
Ayes 82, noes 16. The bill is passed.
And turning to page 12 of today's printed calendar, House Bill 1101, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to automatic notification of registration of sex offenders, common interest communities.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The bill is passed.
Continuing with today's calendar, House bills on second reading uncontested calendar. Page 12, printed calendar, House bills on second reading uncontested calendar. Bills in the block, first up, House Bill 127, a bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to real property tax exemption, spouse of member of armed forces killed in action. Report for the Committee on Finance with a substitute.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Knight.
Mr. Speaker, I move the substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Virginia Beach.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 127 clarifies that killed in action also means died of wounds received in action for the purposes of tax relief for spouses of service members. Mr. Speaker, I move the House engross the bill and pass to its third reading.
House Bill 421, a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to real property tax exemptions for veterans with a service-connected disability and surviving spouses of members of the armed forces killed in action. Report for the Committee on Finance with a substitute.
The gentleman from Coaston, Mr. Helsel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, this bill is very simple. It just clarifies what property improvements are included in the exemption. There has been confusion across the state dealing with the implementation of the exemption from the Commissioners of Revenue all across the Commonwealth. The substitute presented is a compromise that specifies the type of real property improvements as those used to house or cover motor vehicles or household good and personal effects other than for business purposes. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill and move it on to its third reading. Thank you.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to.
Continuing with the calendar, House Bill 526, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code related to living shorelines. Report to the Committee on Finance.
The gentleman from Middlesex, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, House Bill 526 provides that any shoreline project approved by the Virginia Marine Resources Commission or the applicable local wetlands board and not prohibited by local ordinance shall qualify for full exemption from local property taxes. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 643, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Department of Taxation, limitations on collection of taxes. Report for the Committee on Finance with an amendment.
The gentleman from Chesapeake, Mr. Leftwich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the committee amendments.
Questions on adoption of the committee amendment? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. The gentleman from Chesapeake.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Mr. Speaker, the House Bill 643 just clarifies that the Department of Taxation must initiate suit to collect taxes from a taxpayer within 7 years, as opposed to just simply making an assessment, letting it sit for 8 years, and then collecting it, saying they began collection procedures with simply a letter. I ask that the body engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Turning to page 14 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1064, a bill to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia, repeal several others, all relating to reorganizing and recodifying the statutory duties and responsibilities of the Virginia Information Technology Agency. Report from the Committee on Science and Technology.
The gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, Bill 1064 makes technical changes to the VETA chapter of the Code of Virginia. It came out of the 2014 JLARC study. It codifies certain uncodified language from the 2003 Acts of Assembly. I'd ask that we would engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 1089 has been taken by for the day. Page 15 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1203, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to real property tax exemption, residents of disabled veteran, and the spouse of a service member killed in action. Report for the Committee on Finance with a substitute.
The gentleman from Giles, Mr. Yost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to. Gentleman from Giles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1203 clarifies that manufactured homes owned by and the residents of certain disabled veterans or their surviving spouses of disabled veterans and members of the armed forces killed in action qualify for real property tax exemptions. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to the third reading.
And House Bill 1207, a bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to Family and Children's Trust Fund taxation. Report of the Committee on Finance.
The gentleman from Hanover, Mr. Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 1207 simply clarifies that the Family and Children's Trust Fund performs an essential governmental function so that gifts and contributions would be accepted by the trust fund and exempt from all state and local taxes as regarded as the property of the Commonwealth for purposes of all taxes. I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
That's the final bill in the block because House Bill 1390 has been moved to the regular calendar and by for the day.
Shall the bills be engrossed and passed the third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bills are engrossed and passed to the third reading.
Continuing with the calendar, House bills on second reading regular calendar, page 16 of the printed calendar. House Bill 3 has been taken by until Friday, February 12th. House Bill 193 has been taken by until Thursday, February 11th. House Bill 350 has been taken by until Thursday, February 11th. Similarly, House Bill 689 has been taken by until tomorrow, February 11th. Next up, therefore, House Bill 1096, a bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to regulation of firearms by state entities. Report from the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety with a substitute.
The gentleman from Fauquier, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to. The gentleman from Fauquier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what 1096 does is it essentially puts us in a statute where we were before the governor's executive order this summer, and so that we can conceal carry in state buildings.
Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, this bill says that no agency can propose any rule or regulation or have any policy regarding firearms. So does that mean that the signs that we started to see popping up around Capitol Square and a number of these executive buildings that have a little gun and a red circle and a slash through it are going to go away? You're going to not be able to tell folks they can't bring a gun into an executive building? Is that right?
Mr. Speaker, I would tell the gentleman that he is correct.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a further question?
Gentleman yield?
I will not.
Gentleman declines yield.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of the bill.
Gentleman has floor.
Mr. Speaker, this bill was drafted very broadly to have the widest possible application and leave very little room for anybody to try and wiggle their way out of it. And we've heard a little bit of speculation as to why that might be. And in fact, this is a House substitute because we had to send back the original version of the bill because it had some unintended consequences. It was drafted so broadly that it would have included universities, community colleges, institutions of higher education, and all the campus police folks showed up in committee to object to that. So we took that out. But we didn't take out a number of state agencies. We didn't take out, for instance, we have an exception for the Virginia State Police. We don't have an exception for the Capitol Police. We don't have an exception for the Virginia Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. So arguably under this statute, the way it's drafted, the way I read it, and I would have asked these as questions, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I read it, the Supreme Court can't put up a sign that says no weapons entered into because they are a state agency and they're not explicitly exempted from this bill. The same thing for the Department of Forensic Science, which is our medical examiner's office. Same thing for the Virginia Parole Board. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge folks, I understand what this bill is trying to do and what it's trying to reverse. I think it may be written a little too broadly. I think it probably has some unintended consequences, and I would hope there would be the will of the body to vote no and not engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
The gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Lingenfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the bill.
Gentleman has floor.
I would urge the body to support this bill. I think it's unfortunate that this executive order was brought forward in the first place. When we do public policy, particularly around the issue of public safety, there should be a true and clear basis for that policy. You just don't have this sort of plethora of shootings going on in state buildings. It's not going on. And so, to a certain extent, this might have been addressed if someone had brought us clear evidence that there was a problem. No such evidence was brought forward. And on top of that, it is my understanding from discussions that I have had personally with both the Virginia State Police and the Capitol Police that they were never queried on whether or not this was a necessary policy. So I understand the concern, the expressed concern of the administration, but I believe that the order in and of itself was bad policy because it was not based on good facts. And so I would urge the body to support the bill.
Gentleman Fauquier, Mr. Weber.
Thank you. I forgot to ask the body to move the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Okay, thank you. Gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Speaker. My mother used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And whatever you may say about the executive order, the bill before us, again, is extraordinarily broadly written. When I look at the words that start on line 15 and are repeated on line 20, purchase, possession, transfer, ownership, carrying, storage, or transportation of firearms. So we're telling an agency that unless we pass a statute, you cannot have any policies about purchasing that weapon. Now, are we going to go in and micromanage exactly what if an agency has a need for firearms in its mission? Are we going to go in and micromanage and talk about exactly what you're supposed to do as far as the purchase of those weapons, or the transfer of those weapons, or the ownership of those weapons? Again, this is really much too broadly stated and should not be passed in reaction to a much more narrow executive order about the carrying of weapons in agencies. Thank you.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 18 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1348, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to smoking in motor vehicles, presence of minor under age of 8, civil penalty, reported to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety. And Mr. Speaker, there is a floor substitute.
The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Pillion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the floor substitute.
Has the floor substitute?
It has been distributed and online. I apologize. Yes.
The questions on adoption of the floor substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Floor substitute is agreed to. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The floor substitute of House Bill 1348 provides that any person who smokes in a motor vehicle with a child under the age of 8 is subject to a civil penalty of $100 and makes any violation of this provision a secondary offense. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed its third reading.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Campbell, Mr. Ferris.
Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the patron that I know his bill has good intentions, but would he not agree that drinking chocolate milk is bad for children?
Can I interrupt you for a second? Are you asking him a question, or are you just...
Yes, sir.
Okay. Will the gentleman yield? The gentleman yields.
Yes, I yield.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the patron, would he not agree that drinking chocolate milk is bad for children's health?
There are benefits to chocolate milk.
Mr. Speaker, another question, follow-up question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
I'd ask the patron, is chocolate milk on his list of things to outlaw next year?
I would respond to the gentleman, no.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Augusta, Mr. Landis.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, I know he knows as well as members of the House do how important it is for public safety for our law enforcement officers to enforce the laws and make sure that the public is protected. My question, Mr. Speaker, related to that is, can the gentleman tell me if a deputy, a member of the state police, a trooper, along a roadway, saw a parent smoking in the vehicle, but what that parent was smoking was what we call, I guess, a vape or vapor, a piece of e-cigarette. would this bill then apply to that situation?
Mr. Speaker, I would respond to that Delegate Peace actually asked that question in 2010 to the Attorney General Cuccinelli, and he responded that it did not apply to this.
Mr. Speaker, further question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman tell me how a law enforcement officer would know the difference if someone was holding an e-cigarette or a real cigarette to their lips and was trying to enforce this law, and how they could tell the difference?
It's a secondary offense. So first of all, they're not going to be pulling the car over for just that. And so if you examine the two different things that are smoking, one's emitting vapor, one's actually emitting smoke as defined in the code. So that's how they tell the difference.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a final question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield, agree that going to my original statement, first question, that is this that important given the fact that they might stop them for the e-cigarette or the cigarette for this secondary offense when somebody's speeding past that law enforcement officer and actually causing harm to other potential motorists along the roadway? Would this be more important for them to stop those individuals, those parents that are smoking in their car, than for the law enforcement officer then to pursue someone who's recklessly driving or speeding, as the gentleman from Scott is known to do?
Mr. Speaker, I would respond to that question as I already have. This is a secondary offense, so they would probably have already been pulled over for something severe enough that that warranted them being pulled over. So, yes.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Lingenfelter.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman from Scott rise for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
I would ask the gentleman, Mr. Speaker, he knows how much I respect him as a legal mind and as a defender of freedom, as someone who stands against nanny state bills and stands up for people to make the choices they can freely make. And I would just ask the gentleman to give me some comfort. Does he support this bill?
I would say to the gentleman that I do support the bill. This is for the children.
For the children.
The gentleman from Hopewell, Mr. Ingram.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak to the bill.
Gentleman has floor.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, I smoked from the time I was 12 years old until I was like 59, okay? And I quit while I was still in the General Assembly. And Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, we have a tendency here to tell everybody how to live. We tell them what to do, how to act. And this bill, when I smoked, I have 3 children. And even in the wintertime, I would crack my window like this so that the smoke would go outside. I think this is an infringement on people, that they have control of their own lives, and I urge the body, in all due respect to my good friend from Abington, to vote against this bill.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading?
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill. Down front, you're looking too far back.
You know, it never hurts to press your speak button.
I'm sorry, I pushed the speak button here.
Gentleman from Stafford, Mr. Dudenheffer.
I respect the opinion of my colleague, having been a smoker, but I have never been a smoker, but I was a subject of the abuses that come from a parent who had no regard for my health when it came to that. And I grew up with a chain smoker my entire young life, and I have a chronic cough that comes from that. My friends make fun of me at times because they can find me in a department store or a grocery store or at church because they can hear my cough. I think we need to protect children. We require them to wear seatbelts. We require them to get into car seats. And I think this is just another step in protecting our children. Thank you.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing with second reading regular, House Bill 63, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to local license tax and sales and use tax exemptions, certain nonprofit organizations. Report from the Committee on Finance with amendments.
The gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Lingenfelter.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd move the committee amendments.
The questions on adoption of the committee amendment, as many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. The gentleman from Prince William.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 63 provides exemptions from sales and use tax and local license tax for certain nonprofit veterans organizations. The bill conforms Virginia's law to changes made to the IRS code at the federal level and is needed to remove any confusion about the tax status of organizations like the VFW and the American Legion. I move we engross the bill and pass it to a third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 19 of the printed calendar, House Bill 872, a bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia and to repeal the third enactment of Chapter 655 of the Acts of Assembly of 2012 relating to sales and use tax exemption, certain data centers. Report from the Committee on Finance with a substitute. Mr. Speaker, there also is a floor amendment to the committee substitute, which has been distributed and is available online.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The gentleman from Fairfax.
Mr. Speaker, over the last decade, we found the importance of the data center industry to the Commonwealth. In 2014, the statewide economic impact attributed to this industry was over 36,000 jobs, $2.7 billion in wages, $8.6 billion in economic output, and almost $300 million in state and local taxes. This is a broad industry from Northern Virginia to Southside, which is the home of the new Microsoft data center, to a new center to Chairman Wise, Friend Wise, 65,000 square foot new data center in Wise, Virginia. What this bill does is extends the sunset 15 years. While I've normally been a fan of shorter sunset because of the long lag time and the huge investments in this, I think it's incredibly important to go ahead and do it 15 years, also recognizing that at least 12 states have no sunset at all. I hope it'd be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
The clerk will report a floor amendment.
Floor amendment offered by Delegate Marshall of Prince William to the committee substitute. Amendment 1, after line 142, insert the language that has been distributed and is available online.
Gentleman, Prince William, Mr. Marshall, to explain his floor amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I saw this bill in the Finance Committee, which I'm a member, I had legislation addressing this, but it had not been called up, and I didn't know if it was ever going to be called up before the second coming. So I decided to offer this amendment to raise this issue to address the circumstance in Prince William County. This amendment is drawn up as a universe of one. One piece of property in the state matches this description. It's in Haymarket. It's been purchased apparently by Mr. Jeff Bezos, owner of Amazon, who is apparently, in his own estimate, above and beyond accountability to anybody. In a New York Times article about his sweatshop type operation, he showed how compassionate he was in some of his warehouses by, rather than installing air conditioning in his warehouses, he was so compassionate as to offer to put ambulances outside of his establishment so that when workers fainted from exhaustion and heat stroke, they were immediately transported to hopefully be revived in the comfort of a local ambulance. Several hundred people in Western Prince William have written Mr. Bezos after this article where he told readers of the New York Times and a reporter that he would answer all queries from the common man and woman. He answered none of those. A member of the other body and myself, and I believe members of this body here, have written Mr. Bezos, again, with no answer. The impact that the placement of a data center on property actually could hold about 5 of these data centers on the local property value will range from a loss of $30 to $50 million. Now, we give tax breaks and tax benefits to an industry that will promote the common good and provide some material benefit or even jobs. But when you've got a data center 6 miles outside of an industrial zone that is going to cause this much damage for many, many years, I don't think they should get the benefit of a sales tax exemption. If he wants to come in here and wreck neighborhoods, we shouldn't give him a tax benefit to do so. So all this does, it exempts, if they're going to build this here, and by the way, when the State Corporation Commission, we were asking for hearings to be held after this session of the General Assembly was over. I received a response from the State Corporation Commission that said, well, we've decided to hold the hearings when we will hold them during the session because Amazon and Dominion Power have a construction schedule and they want to meet it. Well, you know, I asked myself, are they really going to hold a hearing? Or are they just going to sign off on a construction schedule because Mr. Plutocrat decides he wants to build this and nothing will get in his way? Well, again, if he wants to build it and he wants to wreck Western Prince William County, that's really not his business, but this body should not be in the business of giving him a tax break on this investment.
Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Keene.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking against the floor amendment.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of points, if I can share with the colleagues. I certainly understand and appreciate the concerns of the delegate from Prince William, but I serve on the subcommittee that'll be meeting this afternoon that'll be taking up these bills. In fact, I was just checking the agenda and talking to the chairman about this because there are several other bills that are still pending, including one of mine, and so this will definitely be coming up today. So I would assure the gentleman that his bill will be heard today. But the other reason is because the underlying bill is one that we crafted the last couple of years to make sure it's as narrow as possible, but provides the tax incentive that we really need to be competitive across the country for a burgeoning industry that we all know is the data centers are creating a lot of jobs and bringing more revenue to the state. But more importantly, the reason why the data centers are so important for Virginia, and many of our colleagues from the Appropriations and the Finance Committee had a chance to visit some of the data centers during the holidays season when we were up in Northern Virginia. The reason is because the internet was literally created in Northern Virginia, and the hub of where all the fiber goes through across the entire world's spectrum of World Wide Web is based in Northern Virginia. And so it's really critical that we maintain that leadership. And so I'd urge the body to reject the floor amendment.
I didn't know Al Gore was from Northern Virginia. Did y'all? Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the motion.
Gentleman has, speaking to the amendment.
To the amendment, yes, sir. And Mr. Speaker, I would hope everybody would vote no on this amendment. My friend here to my right, the gentleman from Wise, has an expression about get your own bill. But here's the fact. The gentleman from Prince William has his own bill. It's up in committee today. He just wants to add this onto my bill. And here's, again, the underlying bill that we have here today. Not even talking about Amazon. This bill passes, we are going to have a shot at bringing more facilities, at least one, worth at least $1.5 billion to the Commonwealth. The fact is, we don't want to play around with this. We want to bring those jobs here. We have said here, all of us on both sides of the aisle, that this session is about jobs, about the economy, about improving that. I think this bill can do it. When the gentleman's own bill comes up later today, that this amendment's drafted on, in committee, I'll be inclined to vote for it. but this is not the time nor the place for it. I hope people will vote no on the amendment, and please come and look at the subcommittee today, and everybody can weigh in on his bill later this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Marshall.
Addressing the measure one more time.
Gentleman has the floor.
When I devised this amendment and told constituents, and I gave them my promise, a hearing on this bill was in the ether, Mr. Speaker. And I again, know if this was ever going to come up, so I make a promise, I keep a promise, I want to raise this issue and fight for my constituents. Thank you. And I hope the gentleman from Fairfax will give me a favorable vote this afternoon.
Did you withdraw the amendment? That's a good move. Questions on adoption of the floor amendment offered by the gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Marshall. As many as favor adoption of the floor amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Chairs in doubt. The floor amendment is rejected. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to a third reading?
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman yield.
Yes.
Yes, sir, I yield.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentleman, as I read this very good bill, when it had an impact statement attached to it, it said there's no fiscal impact. Is the theory behind that even when there is a sales and tax use exemption, there's going to be so much money flowing in that it more than countermands any loss in revenue that might arise as a result of the exemption?
And we had meetings with the Appropriations Chairman and staff on this bill. The reason is we're extending the sunset. The current sunset ends in 2020. It doesn't impact the current budget because the sunset we are impacting is way in the out years. They take this into account within the budget.
Thank you. Follow-up question, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
And as I read this bill, would I be correct that they only get the exemption if they create new jobs and they pay 150% of the average statewide, 1.5 times the prevailing average wage in that locality? Is that not correct? In other words, we're giving them a benefit because they're paying more than the average wage in that locality. Is that right?
We're giving them that benefit because of that, because of the things I said about what it does to the economy, $289.9 million in state and local taxes, and also because the average data center employee makes $105,942 per year. That's in 2014 dollars.
I thank the gentleman speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I'm very proud to support this very fine bill.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1093, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to an income tax credit for donations of food crops to nonprofit food banks. Report from the Committee on Finance with an amendment.
The gentleman from Rockbridge, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendment.
Questions on adoption of the committee amendment? As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The committee amendment is agreed to. The gentleman from Rockbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1093 addresses two different concerns that are prevalent across the Commonwealth: food insecurity and the quality of the food that is provided through our food banks. The bill would provide a $5,000 non-refundable tax credit to farmers who grow fruits and vegetables and donate those to food banks locally. The food banks are saying that they do not have enough fresh produce locally grown to provide. Instead, they have to go out of the area to purchase, and it's more expensive. This is a way to incentivize the farmers to donate excess crops to the food banks and help address both problems of food insecurity and the quality of food provided. Hope it would be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman yield.
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentleman, under the fiscal impact, it says the tax commissioner would be prohibited from issuing more than $1.75 million in credits for this program in any year. Can the gentleman tell me how that figure was arrived at?
Mr. Speaker, I'd say to the gentleman, we put a cap on the original bill, but we lowered it in committee. It's no longer 1.75 million, it's 250,000.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for another question?
Gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the gentleman, is that factored into the budget so far as you know?
Mr. Speaker, I'd say to the gentleman, yes, it is, and it is included in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1122, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Commonwealth Space Flight Fund, transfer of funds, for the Committee on Science and Technology with amendments.
The gentleman from Accomack, Mr. Bloxham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee amendments.
Questions on adoption of the committee amendments? As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendments are agreed to. Gentleman from Accomack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1122 simply extends the sunset to 2024 for the Virginia Spaceport. This coincides with the contract dates that Orbital ATK has been awarded to supply the space station until 2024. The increase in the money allotted is a code adjustment following the budget. I hope it is the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turning to page 20 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1252 has been taken by for the day. That completes second reading regular calendar. Next up, resolutions uncontested calendar.
The gentleman from Loudoun, Mr. Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side, for which House Bill 944 on page 8 failed to pass, I would ask that we reconsider that vote.
The gentleman from Loudoun, Mr. Greason, moves that having voted on the prevailing side, by which we failed to pass House Bill 944, we reconsider that vote. As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is before us.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion.
Gentleman may state it.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that that bill go by for the day.
Without objection, House Bill 944 by for the day.
Thank you.
Continuing.
Clerk will continue.
With the calendar, resolutions, uncontested calendar, page 20 of the printed version of the calendar, House Joint Resolution 97, directing the Joint Commission on Technology and Science to study the Commonwealth's aerospace industry. Report for the Committee on Science and Technology with a substitute.
The gentleman from Newport News, Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute? As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to. The gentleman from Newport News.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the House, House Joint Resolution 97 directs JCOTS to do an aerospace advisory review of how to grow the Commonwealth's industry in aerospace, from education right on through to manufacturing to new opportunities in the aerospace industry. Mr. Speaker, much like what the Virginia Chamber of Commerce did with the Blueprint for Virginia, this is the same way to grow our economy with new opportunities. This is from the Aerospace Advisory Council that myself and Delegate Sickles and Bloxham serve on, and would move that we pass the resolution.
Shall the resolution be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 100, no 0.
Ayes 100, no 0. The resolution is adopted.
Continue with the calendar, resolutions, regular calendar, House Joint Resolution 1 has been taken by until Friday, February 12th. Accordingly, that completes the calendar.
Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
No communications, just this afternoon's meetings. The Appropriations Higher Education Subcommittee is meeting 15 minutes upon adjournment of the House up in the 9th floor Appropriations Room. That's an additional meeting. They'll meet approximately at 2:15. Then 1/2 hour after adjournment of the House, full appropriations will meet, again in the 9th floor Appropriations Room. Courts of Justice Committee, they're going to meet a 1/2 hour after adjournment of the House down in House Room C on the 1st floor of the GAB, and then the subcommittees are stacked thereafter. Courts of Justice Civil Law Sub will meet immediately upon adjournment of the full committee. That's a change in time and location for Courts Civil Law Sub. Then Courts Constitutional Law Sub will meet immediately upon adjournment of the Civil Sub, again in House Room C. And then finally, Courts of Justice Criminal Law will meet immediately upon adjournment of the Constitutional Law Subcommittee. That's a change in time for criminal law of courts. Then 1 hour after adjournment of the House, approximately 3 o'clock, Finance Committee will meet down in the first floor, House Room D of the GAB. That's a new meeting for House Finance. Finance Subcommittee number 1 will meet immediately upon adjournment of the full committee, again in House Room D. That's a change in time for Finance Sub 1. Appropriations Committee, Agriculture, Commerce, Technology, and Natural Resources Subcommittee, they will meet today at 3 o'clock in the 9th floor Appropriations Room. Change in time for Approbes Agriculture Sub. The Agriculture, Chesapeake Natural Resource Committee's Natural Resources Subcommittee, they'll meet at 4 o'clock today in the 8th floor West Conference Room over in the GAB. The Appropriations Elementary and Secondary Education Subcommittee, they'll meet at 4 today as well. They'll be up on the 9th floor. That's a change in day and time for Approbes Elementary and Secondary Ed Sub. County, Cities, and Towns Subcommittee number 2 will meet today. They're going to do so at 4 o'clock in 7 West Conference Room in the GAB. Finance Committee, Subcommittee number 2, will meet in the 5th floor East Conference Room at 4 today, Finance Sub 2. And then the Transportation Subcommittee number 2, that they'll meet immediately upon adjournment of the Finance Subcommittee meeting in House Room D. That's a change in date, time, and location. So Transportation Subcommittee number 2 is meeting today over in House Room D later this afternoon. Transportation Subcommittee number 4, that meeting has been canceled. However, Appropriations Transportation Subcommittee, they will be meeting immediately upon adjournment of the Appropriations Elementary and Secondary Education, again up in the 9th floor. That's sequenced as well. This is an additional meeting for Appropriations Transportation Sub. HWI Subcommittee number 3 meeting has been canceled. Also, the Rural Caucus today, that meeting has been canceled. Looking ahead to tomorrow, Thursday, February 11th, Transportation Committee, Subcommittee number 3, they'll be meeting bright and early at 7 a.m. in House Room C. Likewise, the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, as the chair mentioned previously, will be meeting at 7 o'clock. They'll be in the 5th floor West Conference Room over in the GAB. That's a change in location for the Sportsmen's Caucus. MIPS Subcommittee number 2, that meeting tomorrow is canceled. Militia Police Public Safety Subcommittee 2 will not be meeting. However, there will be a special Rules Subcommittee meeting tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. in the 6th floor Speakers Conference Room. That's a new meeting for Special Rules Sub. Then the Hampton Roads Caucus will be meeting at 8 o'clock, but they'll be in the 3rd floor East Senate Conference Room. That's a change in location. The Outdoor Recreation Caucus, they'll also be meeting tomorrow morning at 8 in the 5th floor East Conference Room. Later tomorrow morning at 8:30, the Transportation Committee will meet down in the 1st floor in House Room C. However, HWI will not be meeting tomorrow. Health and Welfare Institutions meeting, that has been canceled tomorrow. Similarly, HWI Subcommittee 2, they will not be meeting tomorrow. Then at 10 o'clock, House Rules, the Committee on Rules will meet at 10 in the 6th floor Speakers Conference Room. This is an additional meeting for Rules. And finally, the Appropriations Public Safety Subcommittee will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the 9th floor Appropriations Room. The Democratic Caucus will meet at 11:30 a.m. in House Room 2. The Republican Caucus will meet at 11:30 in House Room 1, and there's a test of what all I just said.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Bullivant. Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Bullivant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, as the clerk announced, we're going to be having our inaugural meeting of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus tomorrow morning in room 5 East. Hey, don't laugh. 8 o'clock in the morning. The purpose is twofold. First of all, outdoor recreation is a serious business in Virginia. It's worth about $13.6 billion to our economy. But the other thing is just simply to have some fun. We're looking to organize some outdoor events during the session as well as throughout the year. The first meeting will be joined by the director of our state parks, who's going to go over some of the neat initiatives they are having. And then our next meeting next week will actually be hosted by the Virginia Craft Beer Guild. Not in the General Assembly. The outdoor part will be that you'll have to walk from the GAB
to 8th Street. Anyways, I hope you will join me tomorrow morning and come out for the caucus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Powhatan, Mr. Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't offer craft beers, but the House Finance Committee will be meeting. It's a little bit unusual. The full committee will meet very briefly. We have one bill, 1 hour after adjournment, and then the subcommittees will meet as customary.
Thank you. The gentleman from Campbell, Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Speaker, I made an announcement in the morning hour about tomorrow's steak fries. Everyone was sent an invitation to their office, and that was for their secretary. We know who all of you are and invite you to come. You won't need a ticket.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move when the House adjourn today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon.
He's been riding in cars with people smoking. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves when the House adjourn today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now adjourn.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House to now adjourn. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 12 noon.